Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Simple Stories Jingle All the Way collection. I purchased the 6x8 paper pad and I'm just going to flip through these really quickly. Some of the patterns are a full 6x8 design. I won't use any of those, I'm going to use the opposite side. There's also a couple of sheets that have 3x4 inch cut aparts, and I will use several of those on my cards. I'll just show you the other side of all the pattern papers. It's a beautiful collection. I love the traditional colors, and then there's that little bit of blue in there as well. I also purchased the coordinating ephemera pack. So I'm going to lay out all the pieces so you can see everything that's included, lots of sentiment and image icons. And I did use quite a few of these on my cards. Now, since this is a larger paper pad at 6x8 inches, I decided to record the process of assembling just one card of each design. And most of them I will be making 4 cards for each design. For my first card, I'm using a sketch from MFT. This is number 513. I have some poinsettia paper for the background. It's beautiful paper. And then I'm putting a diagonal stripe of this green with red polka dot papers on the front. I have that polka dot paper a little wider than the card base, and then I'll just trim away the extra when I flip over the panel. I did mat that green polka dot paper with some scraps of the green cardstock. I didn't use a full sheet since I don't have a lot of this specific green. For the thin strip that goes across the card, I'm using a Love from Lizi peel off. This is the straight design in the red mirror color. It's going to add some beautiful shine to the card. I do cut it a little wider than the card, just tuck the ends behind. That way it's not going to come off later. I'm going to put my card front onto a card base. And for the sentiment, I'm using some of the sentiment cut aparts from Paper Rose. This is their Crisp Christmas sentiment sheets. I love their sentiment sheets and have been using the Christmas one quite a bit this month. So I'm cutting both of the ends to match that angle of the card, and I'll adhere it using some liquid adhesive. And I'm using the Barely Art liquid glue. I felt like the part underneath the sentiment really needed something. So I'm using this beautiful poinsettia die. And then also some of the pine or branch sprigs. So there's 2 different pieces for the flower. And then I'm going to tuck the little branches behind. You're not going to see most of it, so I did trim away some of the extra. I'll have the single branch on the right hand side of the flower and then the 3 little branches on the left hand side, just to balance it out. I'll put some more liquid adhesive on the back. I don't need to get every little pine needle, just the main area, and then I'll adhere it to my card. I decided to use some more Love from Lizi peel-offs, this time the mini circles in the gold glitter color, using the smallest size and putting 3 of them in the center of the poinsettia. Add some beautiful sparkle and finishes off the look of the flower. There is my finished card, and I did make 4 using this sketch. For 2 of the cards, I did use a different sentiment. I love all the traditional colors on this card. Now moving on to my next card design, I'm using another sketch from MFT. This is number 489. My favorite paper in this whole pack is this tree paper, so I want to make sure to feature that on a card. I chose this sketch for that thinner rectangle piece since that's where I can put that tree paper. For the 2 thin strips that are on the left-hand side of the card, I'm using some stitched strip dies by Pretty Pink Posh. And I put some score tape on the back and then adhere them to the card. And they are longer than the length of the card, so I'm just going to trim away the extra. I love that they have that faux stitch design along the outside. So I'm just going to layer this panel on some red cardstock. And overall, this is a very simple card design. I just really wanted to feature this fun tree pattern paper. So put my card front onto a card base. Before I adhere that tree paper, I am going to put some scrap cardstock on the back, more on the right hand side. That way it'll keep all of the papers level. I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the front of my card. For sentiment, this time I'm going to use a stamp set from Sunny Studio. This is their Inside Greetings holiday set. Just stamped out Season's Greetings. On the right hand side, I did cut the end at an angle just for some extra interest. And then I'm going to add some of those scrap pieces of cardstock to the left hand side. And then I'll just glue it directly onto my card. For finishing touch, I'm going to use some of Love from Lizi's mini star peel-offs. This is the silver mirror color. If you can't tell, I really love this color. My sheet is almost out. I just added 3 of them to the lower right hand corner. There is my finished card, and I did make a total of 4. And I don't always show this part, but I like to add that thin scrap of pattern paper to the inside of the card just for some extra detail. Now moving on to my third card design. The sketch is from Mojo Monday. This is number 539. I'm using 3 different pattern papers on this card. I have the Christmas lights for the background, and then that narrow strip on the left has the cars with Christmas trees or presents on the hood. And I'm going to layer all of these using some red cardstock. Since the 2 pattern papers are fairly busy, adding that cardstock layer helps break up those busy designs. The third pattern paper is this thin strip that goes across the card. It's a dark green pattern paper with tone-on-tone polka dots. And I did put some scrap cardstock on the right and left hand side just to keep it nice and level. I'm going to add some of the Racing Green Mirror Peel-Offs. This is the pinstripe style. I'm using the thinnest width and just putting it on the edge of that green pattern paper. I'll tuck all the ends behind the back, then I'll add this panel onto some red cardstock. And if you are interested in purchasing Love from Lizi peel-offs, I do have a link provided in the description box where you can purchase those. Love from Lizi is based in the UK, so there are international shipping fees depending on where you live. For the little banner that's in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to use that same red cardstock that I have for all the layers. And then before I adhere it, I am going to put some scrap cardstock just on the very upper portion. Again, just always trying to keep my pieces level. So I'll adhere that to the card. And then I used a stitched circle die for this green piece. Put some of that scrap cardstock on the upper portion where it goes over that green strip. And I am going to put 2 pieces of cardstock on the back on that right hand side of the circle. Then I'll adhere to the card using some liquid adhesive. For the image and sentiment on this card, I'm going to use some of the ephemera pieces. I have a snowman and also the sentiment that reads "Celebrate." I'll adhere the snowman using some liquid adhesive. Before I adhere the sentiment, I'm going to put a thin foam square on the right hand side. Since that circle die cut has a couple extra layers underneath it, adding that thin foam square will keep the sentiment nice and level. And then I'll adhere it to the card to the right of the snowman. The finishing touch, I'm going to use some more of the mini star peel-offs, this time in the silver glitter color. And I'm just using the smallest size and putting them around the image and sentiment. And then I'll use the medium and the small size and put them on that red banner. There is my finished card, and I did make a total of 4 using this sketch. I have different ephemera pieces for each of the cards, and for 2 of the cards I used some different pattern papers. I still used the mini stars in the silver glitter color for the other 2 cards, but instead of the green peel-offs, I used some red peel-offs to put to the edge of that red strip of cardstock. I also popped up some of the sentiments using some thin foam squares. Now moving on to my 4th card design. This is the sketch from MFT. It's number 515. I have some plaid paper for the background in black, and it's an off-white or maybe a cream color. And I have some poinsettia paper for the circle, and it's on some black paper. For the one banner that's in the background, I'm using some more of that tone-on-tone green polka dot paper. Just cut a fishtail at the bottom. Then I'll adhere the circle die cut right on top, letting it hang off of the edge just a little bit. Flipped over that panel and trimmed away that extra part of the circle. I'm going to layer all the pieces on some black cardstock. For this sketch, I would normally round the bottom two corners on the card, but my corner rounder recently broke, so I could not do that, and my new one hasn't arrived yet. So there will be no rounded corners in this video. For this smaller banner that goes on top of the circle die cut, I used some specialty mirror cardstock from Tonic Studios. This is their smooth mint color. It's a real nice satin mirror finish. Just glue that directly on top of the circle. And now I pulled out some of the ephemera pieces. I have the sentiment "Believe in the Magic" and also two of the hearts. I'm going to pop up this sentiment using those thin foam squares. And I like this pack since it has the larger squares and also the smaller ones. That way you can get in all those tiny areas. I'll adhere the sentiment to the center of that circle. I was trying to decide if I'd rather have it off to the left more. And I was moving the hearts around. Then I end up going back to where I first placed them on the card. I'm going to glue the green heart down directly with some liquid adhesive, and then I'll pop up the red heart using those thin foam squares. I'll have it overlap just part of the sentiment. Then finishing touch using some more of Love from Lizi peel-offs, this time the mini circles in the black glitter style. I'll put two of them in the lower right-hand corner. I'll put two of them in the upper left-hand corner, and then just one near the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 4. I used different ephemera pieces and also different pattern paper for the other 2 cards. I love all the different poinsettia pattern paper that's included in this paper pad. I think there's at least 3 or 4 different designs. On the Santa card, I used the So Jolly Sentiment Cut Apart by Paper Rose. It went perfectly with that Santa ephemera piece. Now moving on to my next set of cards. I'm going to be making a Slimline card. I used a die from Whimsy Stamps. This is their Slimline Scenic window die. Cut it out using some black cardstock. And I'm just putting adhesive all on the back and adhering it onto some red cardstock. I used the red and black buffalo plaid pattern paper for the 3 windows. And I'm just going to glue those directly into the opening with some liquid adhesive. Now the 2 smaller windows, they are interchangeable, so that part's really nice. I love the scallop edges on the windows and all the little pierced detail. A little harder to see on the black cardstock, at least in the video, but it adds a really nice detail. Now I'll put my card front onto a card base, and my Slimline card is 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. I'm going to leave just that small part of the white card base showing. I'll be adding several ephemera pieces, but first I'm going to use some red holographic peel-offs. I'm going to put 2 of them on the bottom edge of the card. I have the medium width and also the thinnest width. So I'm going to put one right on top of the other. So it's going to add this beautiful shine to the card. And for the Slimline cards, it's nice that you can use the whole peel-off strip. It doesn't go all the way across the card, but you can center it and it looks really pretty. So I'm going to add one of the floral bouquets. Also going to tuck in a few extra pieces with the holly and some of the berries. Let's glue it to the back side of that ephemera piece. Try and figure out where I want to tuck this little berry bunch. Then I'm using the Merry Word sentiment. And I decided to keep this card nice and flat, so I'm gluing the ephemera pieces directly onto the card. That's one of the really great things about Love from Lizi peel-offs. They add some beautiful sparkle and shine without the extra dimension. So you can still mail your cards without paying any additional postage. Now to finish off the card, I'm using some more of the mini circle peel-offs, this time in the gold color. I'll put a few of them in the upper left-hand corner, 2 of them in the lower right-hand corner, and then I'll just sprinkle a few more around the flower image. So there is my finished card. I did make 4, just use some different ephemera pieces, different sentiments, but I still use that same red and black buffalo plaid pattern paper for the background on each of the cards. I didn't realize until I was photographing all the cards, I forgot to add a sentiment to the gingerbread card. That's okay, I'll just put one on the inside. Now moving on to card design number 6. This sketch is from MFT, it's number 516. I have some green gingham paper for the background, and for this large banner, I'm using this hollyberry paper. I'm going to layer that on some red cardstock, and then I'll layer the background piece on some green pearlescent cardstock. And I'm not going to follow this sketch very closely this time. I wanted to make sure to use some of the 3x4 cut-aparts, and I thought this sketch would work out perfectly. I'm going to put my card front onto a card base, then I can add the cut-apart image. So for this one, I'm using the 3 ornaments with the sentiment, Sending Christmas Wishes. I did trim it down a little bit more, so it's not quite the 3x4 inches. Then I layered it on that same green pearlescent cardstock. I'm going to add some scrap cardstock to the upper portion, just keeping everything level. And then I'll adhere it to my card. And then instead of that long, thin banner that's on the left-hand side, I'm going to put a shorter one since I don't want to cover up any of the image. I will put a couple pieces of cardstock on the upper portion of that banner just to keep it level. I think I end up doing 2 of them since I have some extra layers on the image cut apart. And then I'll adhere it to my card using some liquid adhesive. I really like all the green on this card with just that pop of red. Now to finish off the card, I'm using some more of the mini star peel-offs in the silver mirror color. Put 2 of them in the lower right-hand corner, then a few of them around the sentiment and also the ornaments. And since I mostly have the smallest size of the stars left, I am trying to use more of those. And they are super tiny, so if you have these, I highly recommend you use some tweezers. So there is my finished card, and again, I did make 4. Have some different cut-aparts and also some different pattern papers for the other 2 cards. And there are some other cut-aparts that are included in this paper pad, but I only used the 4. I prefer using double-sided papers, but sometimes it's hard to choose which side to use. Now moving on to the next set of cards. This sketch is from Mojo Monday. It's number 364. I have 2 different pattern papers with the pretty holly leaves and berries. I'll layer both of those on this green pearlescent cardstock. And this isn't a specialty cardstock. It's some that I found at Joann's. It's made by Basil. It's the Emerald City color. I like to stock up on the solid cardstock whenever Joann's has their sale. For the background piece, I'm using some craft cardstock, and I decided to add 2 peel-offs to the very bottom. This is the red mirror color in the pinstripe style. So I'm going to layer this piece on that green pearlescent cardstock. I'll put my card front onto a card base, and I am following this sketch fairly closely. I'll adhere the darker green holly paper first. And then before I attach the other paper, I'm going to put that scrap piece of cardstock, just a thin strip on the right-hand side. And I can adhere it to my card. And I am adjusting it slightly since I want to leave room for those peel-offs. For the sentiments, I'm using some more of the paper rose cut-aparts. I have 2 of them, wishing you Christmas cheer. I will put some small cardstock scraps just on the right-hand side of the Christmas cheer since it's going to go off of the other layers. And then I'll adhere both of them using some liquid adhesive. And I decided not to put them straight as indicated on the sketch. I'm going to have them both at an angle. I felt that upper left-hand corner needed a little something extra, so I used a small stitched circle die and then just some red cardstock, and I'm going to add the 2 circles to that upper left-hand corner. So there is my finished card. I did make a total of 4. I just used some different sentiments on 2 of the cards. I think the craft cardstock looks really nice with the traditional Christmas colors. Now moving on to card design number 8. I'm not using a card sketch this time. At this point, I only have 1 full sheet of pattern paper, and it's this beautiful floral design. It's a very busy pattern paper, but I still wanted to use it. I'm going to add a strip of green cardstock across the lower portion. I will use a few of Love from Lizi's Racing Green Mirror peel-offs, just putting them on the edge of that green cardstock. I'll tuck the ends behind the back and then layer this panel on some green cardstock. Then I have 3 oval die cuts. I have 1 in black, 1 in green, and also 1 in this light blue. So I'm going to layer all 3 of those together. I thought having those extra layers on the oval would help break up the busyness of that background pattern paper. Now before I adhere this oval, I am going to put some scrap cardstock behind, just above and below where it goes over that green strip. I had already cut out another oval die cut, but I didn't catch the very edge, so I don't know if you can see that. It's not quite as round as it should be. So rather than waste that oval die cut, I set it aside and then I was able to use it to level out this oval die cut. Before I adhere this card front onto a card base, I decided I'm going to wrap some red and white twine around the top. I'm going to wrap it around 2 times. I'll cut an extra piece for the bow. Make sure it's nice and straight. Then just to make sure the ends aren't going to come off later, I'm going to secure them using a piece of score tape. I'll remove the backing, put some extra ATG on the back. And then on that very upper area near the twine, I'm also going to add some liquid adhesive. I find that adding that liquid adhesive on the upper portion near the twine will secure that panel to the card base better than if I just use the ATG. I do have to hold it for a little bit since the Barely Art glue takes a few seconds longer to adhere. And then I'll tie my bow on the upper left-hand side. And trim off the extras. Now I can start adding my image and sentiment. I'm using this sleigh ephemera piece with a little bird sitting on top. And then for the sentiment, I'm using another paper rose cut apart. This is sending joy and peace. I'm just going to trim off the 2 ends to make sure that it fits within the oval. And then I will add some scrap cardstock pieces where it goes off of the sleigh. Most of my cards from this paper pad are fairly flat, so they won't need any extra postage, but I did make a few with some extra dimension, like this one with the bow. Since I already have that bow on there, I decided to use some thicker bling. So I'm not using any of the mini shape peel-offs this time. I'm going to use some of the dewdrops from Honeybee Stamps. It looks like there are 3 different sizes included in this pack. I used 2 different sizes for my card. I'm putting a drop of glue on the card, then using my embellishment wand to pick up the dewdrop. There is my finished card. I only made 2 since I had just that 1 full sheet of pattern paper left over at this point. For that second card, I used the red door ephemera piece and another paper rose sentiment strip. At this point, here are the leftover pattern paper scraps. Still plenty to make a few more cards. For the next card design, I'm going to use a cover-up die from Whimsy Stamps. This is their Wonky window, I think it's number 3. I will have a link provided in the description box. I used 2 different pattern papers for the little windows, and then I used black cardstock for the frame. I am going to glue this frame onto some more black cardstock, so it's going to leave a little extra matted layer around the outside. It's hard to see on the video since it's in black. And then for all of the little die cut, each opening on this die cut is a different size. So I wanted to make sure to put the correct piece in the correct opening. And I'm just adhering these in place using some liquid adhesive. I put the matching pattern papers diagonal from each other. I think it balanced out the look a little nicer. I'll put my final 2 pieces. So I have the Christmas lights and also the cars with the trees and the presents on the hood. So glue in my last piece. For the sentiment, I'm using a stamp from Sunny Studio stamp set. This is the same set I used on a previous card. Already stamped this out, used some red ink, and then I'm layering that on some red cardstock. I am going to have it going off of the right-hand side just a little bit. So glue it in place, flip over that panel, and then trim away the extra. I'll put my card front onto a card base. Then for a few finishing touches, I'm going to add 2 small banners in the upper left-hand corner. I have one cut out in green and one in red cardstock. I'm going to cut the red one just slightly shorter. I like to lay the 2 die cuts together and then use the green one as a guide when I'm trimming off that extra piece from the red cardstock. Glue those onto the card using some liquid adhesive, and then I'll pull out some more of the silver stars. I did use one more of the medium size, but then mostly using the smallest size. Put 2 of them on the banner, and then I'll put a few of them around the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 3. Just use some different pattern papers and also some of that green pearlescent cardstock for the other 2 frames. I love using different cover-up dies for those final pattern paper scraps. In fact, I'm going to use another one in just a moment. Here is everything I currently have left over. I decided to use the MFT Quilt Square die for my final card. Already gone ahead and cut out all of the pieces, and then I have my frame in black. The way I like to use this die is to put some score tape on the back side, and then I'll inlay all those small quilt pieces. One of the nice things about the MFT quilt die is the pieces are interchangeable. There's 3 different sizes, and you can cut out any of them and they will fit in any of the openings of that same size. This is such a fun die to use for those final pattern paper scraps, since it really looks like a quilt. It has a very small stitched detail around each of the pieces. Now I am speeding this portion up quite a bit, basically just assembling my quilt like a puzzle. I like to build my quilt on a piece of paper first, so while I'm cutting out each of those pattern papers, I know if I need another corner piece or maybe one of the flower pieces. I do have a video, and I will link it at the end of this one, where I show some more detail in a slowed down video of how I cut out those scraps using this die. For the background of this card, I decided to use some more of that specialty Tonic studio paper. So the easy part with this quilt and using the score tape on the back is you just have to remove the release paper and then adhere it directly onto your card. And it's nice and flat and smooth. So you can mail this card easily as long as you don't add any extra bulk. I layered this on some black cardstock, and I'll put my card front onto a card base. For sentiment, using another of the Paper Rose Christmas cut-aparts, but I wanted to anchor it to the card. Probably should have done this before I adhered everything down, but I didn't think about it. Using some black pinstripe peel-offs, put 2 different widths across the bottom portion of the card. Trying to make sure to get them nice and straight, and I'll just use an X-Acto knife to trim off the extra. And I could adhere that sentiment directly onto the peel-off strips, but I didn't want to show the little strip bumps, I guess, through that paper since this is a pattern paper feel. So I'm going to put this on top of some black cardstock. I'm not adding an extra matted layer, I just want to have an extra layer behind it, so then you won't see the bumps of the peel-offs coming through the front. I'll just glue that to the card using some liquid adhesive. So one final finishing touch, I'm using that same specialty mirror cardstock. I cut out a small stitched circle die cut and I'm going to glue that to the center of the quilt square. There is my finished card. I was only able to make one with the leftover pattern paper scraps. So here is all the pattern paper scraps that are left over. Not very many. In addition to the paper pad, I also used 6 sheets of 8.5 by 11 and 10 sheets of 12 by 12 solid colored cardstock. A total of 34 cards were made using Simple Stories Jingle All the Way 6 by 8 paper pad. This was such a fun Christmas collection to use, and it is my final Christmas video for 2020. I have decided that next year I'm going to do some more Christmas videos earlier on in the year. So maybe I'll do one in February, maybe do one in April. I'm going to try to mix it up. That way I'm not rushing in November and December to try to get all of my Christmas cards made. I will have links provided in the description box for most of the products used in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.